Listen and relax. Crafting serenity, one audiobook at a time.
Which was in order up to within 3 days, but contained nothing of special interest, except just the facts of missing men. The greatest interest, however, was with regard to the paper found in the bottle, which was today produced at the inquest, and the more strange narrative than the two between them unfold, it has not been my lot to come across. As there is no motive for concealment, I am permitted to use them, and accordingly send you a rescript simply omitting technical details of seamanship and supercargo. It almost seems as though the captain had been seized with some kind of mania before he'd got well into blue water, and that this had developed persistently throughout the voyage. Of course, my statement must be taken cum grano, since I am writing from the dictation of a clerk of the Russian consul, who kindly translated for me, time being short. The log of the Demeter, Varna to Whitby, written 18th July. Things so strange happening that I should keep an accurate note henceforth till we land. On 6th of July we finished taking in cargo, silver sand and boxes of earth. At noon set sail, east wind, fresh. Crew 5 hands, 2 mates, cook and myself, captain. On 11th of July at dawn entered Bosphorus, boarded by Turkish customs officers, bakshish, all correct, underway at 4 p.m. On 12th of July through Dardanelles, more custom officers, and a flagboat guarding squadron, bakshish again. Work of officers thorough but quick, want us off soon. Dark, passed into archipelago. On 13th of July we passed Cape Matapan. Crew dissatisfied about something, seemed scared but would not speak out. On 14th of July, somewhat anxious about crew, men all steady, fellows who have sailed with me before. Mate could not make out what was wrong. They only told him there was something and crossed themselves. Mate lost temper with them that day and struck him. Expected a fierce quarrel, but all was quiet. On 16th July, mate reported in the morning that one of the crew, Petrovsky, was missing. Could not account for it. Took larboard watch 8 bells last night. Was relieved by Abuma. Did not go to bunk. Men more downcast than ever. All said they expected something of the kind, but would not say more than there was something aboard. Mate getting very impatient with them, feared some trouble ahead. On 17th of July, yesterday, one of the men, Olgarden, came to my cabin and in an awestruck way confided to me that he thought there was a strange man aboard the ship. He said that in his watch he had been sheltering behind the deckhouse as there was a rainstorm, when he saw a tall, thin man who was not like any of the crew come up the companionway and go along the deck forward and disappear. He followed cautiously, but when he got to bows found no one, and the hatchways were all closed. He was in a panic of superstitious fear, and I am afraid the panic may spread. To allay it, I shall today search the entire ship carefully, from stem to stern. Later in the day I got together the whole crew, told them, as they evidently thought there was someone in the ship, we would search from stem to stern. First the mate, angry, said it was folly to yield to such foolish ideas and would demoralise the men. Said he would engage to keep them out of trouble with the handspike. I let him take the helm while the rest began a thorough search. All keeping abreast with lanterns, we left no corner unsearched, and there were only the big wooden boxes. There were no odd corners where a man could hide. Men much relieved when search over and went back to work cheerfully. First mate scowled but said nothing. 22nd of July. Rough weather the last 3 days and all hands busy with the sails. No time to be frightened. Men seemed to have forgotten their dread. Mate cheerful again and all on good terms. Praise men for work in bad weather. Past Gibraltar and out through straits. All well. 24th of July. There seems some doom over this ship. Already a hand short and entering the Bay of Biscay with wild weather ahead. Yet last night another man lost. Disappeared. Like the first, he came off his watch and was not seen again. Men, all in a panic of fear, sent a round robin, asking to have double watch as they feared to be alone. Mate angry, fear there will be some trouble, as either he or the men will do some violence. 28th of July, another tragedy. Had a single watch tonight as crew too tired to double. When morning watch came on deck, he could find no one except steersman. Raised an outcry and all came on deck. Thorough search, but no one found. And now without second mate and crew in a panic. Mate and I agreed to go armed henceforth and wait for any sign of cause. 30th of July. Last night rejoiced. We are nearing England. Weather fine, all sails set. Retired, worn out, slept soundly. Awakened by mate telling me that both men of the watch steersman are missing. Only self and mate and 2 hands left to work the ship. August the 1st. 2 days of fog and not a sail sighted. I'd hoped when in the English Channel to be able to signal for help or get in somewhere. Not having power to work sails, I have to run before the wind. Dare not lower as could not raise them again. We seem to be drifting into some terrible doom. Mate now more demoralised than either of the men. His stronger nature seems to have worked inwardly against himself. Men are beyond fear, working stolidly and patiently with minds made up. They are Russian, he a Romanian. 2nd August, midnight. Woke up from a few minutes' sleep by hearing a cry, seemingly outside my port. I could see nothing in the fog. Rushed on deck and ran against the mate. Tells me he heard a cry and ran, but no sign of the man on watch. 1 more gone. Lord help us. Mate says we must be past the Straits of Dover. As in a moment of fog lifting he saw North Foreland, just as he heard the man cry out. So we are now off in the North Sea, and only God can guide us in the fog, which seems to move with us, and God seems to have deserted us. 3rd of August. At midnight I went to relieve the man at the wheel, and when I got to it found no one there. The wind was steady, and as we ran before it, there was no yawing. I dared not leave it, so shouted for the mate. After a few minutes he rushed up on deck in his flannels. He looked wild-eyed and haggard, and I greatly fear his reason had given way. He came close to me and whispered hoarsely with his mouth to my ear, as though fearing the very air might hear. It is here. I know it now. On the watch last night I saw it, like a man, tall and thin and ghastly pale. It was in the bows looking out. I crept up behind it and gave it my knife, but the knife went through it, empty as the air. As he spoke he took his knife and drove it savagely into space. Then he went on, but it is here, and I'll find it. It is in the hold, perhaps in one of those boxes. I'll unscrew them one by one and see. You work the helm. And with a warning look and his finger on his lip, he went below. There was springing up a choppy wind, and I could not leave the helm. I saw him come out on deck again with a tool chest and a lantern, and go down the forward hatchway. He is mad, stark raving mad, and it is no use my trying to stop him. He can't hurt those big boxes, they are invoiced as clay, and to pull them about is as harmless a thing as he could do. So here I stay and mind the helm and write these notes. I can only trust in God and wait until the fog clears. Then if I can't steer into any harbour, with the wind that is, I shall cut down the sails and lie by and signal for help. It is nearly all over now, just as I was beginning to hope that the mate would come out calmer, for I heard him knocking away at something in the hold, and work is good for him. There came up the hatchway a sudden startled scream, which made my blood run cold, and up on the deck he came as if shot from a gun, a raging madman with his eyes rolling, his face convulsed with fear. Save me, he cried. And then he looked round on the blanket of fog. His horror turned to despair, and in a steady voice he said, You'd better come to, Captain, before it's too late. He is there. I know the secret now. The sea will save me from him, and that's all that is left. Before I could say a word or move forward to seize him, he sprang on the bulwark and deliberately threw himself into the sea. I suppose I know the secret too now. It was this madman who had got rid of the men one by one, and now he has followed them himself. God help me. How am I to account for all those horrors when I get to port? When I get to port, will that ever be? Still fog which the sunrise cannot pierce. I know there is a sunrise because I am a sailor. Why else I know not. I dared not go below, dared not leave the helm. So here all night I stayed, and in the dimness of the night I saw it. Him. God forgive me, but the mate was right to jump overboard. It was better to die like a man, to die like a sailor in blue water. No man can object. But I am captain and I must not leave my ship. For I shall baffle this fiend or monster. For I shall tie my hands to the wheel when my strength begins to fail. And along with them I shall tie that which it, dare not touch. And then by good wind or foul I shall save my soul and my honour as a captain. I am growing weaker and the night is coming on. If he can look me in the face again, I may not have time to act. If we are wrecked, maybe this bottle may be found, and those who find it may understand. If not, well, then all men shall know that I have been true to my trust. God and the Blessed Virgin and the saints help a poor ignorant soul trying to do his duty. Of course the verdict was an open one. There is no evidence to adduce whether or not the man himself committed the murders. There is now none to say. The folk here hold almost universally that the captain is simply a hero, and he is to be given a public funeral. Already it is arranged that his body is to be taken with a train of boats up the Esk for a piece, and then brought back to Tate Hill Pier and up the Abbey steps, where it is to be buried in the churchyard on the cliff. The owners of more than 100 boats have already given in their names as wishing to follow him to the grave. No trace has ever been found of the great dog, at which there is much mourning, for with public opinion in its present state he would, I believe, be adopted by the town. Tomorrow we shall see the funeral, and so will end this one more mystery of the sea. Mina Murray's journal, 8th of August. Lucy was very restless all night, and I too could not sleep. The storm was fearful. As it boomed loudly among the chimney pots, it made me shudder. When a sharp puff came, it seemed to be like a distant gun. Strangely enough, Lucy did not wake, but she got up twice and dressed herself. Fortunately, each time I awoke in time, I managed to undress her without waking her, and got her back to bed. It's a very strange thing, this sleepwalking, for as soon as her will is thwarted in any physical way, her intention, if there be any, disappears, and she yields herself almost exactly to the routine of her life. Early in the morning we both got up and went down to the harbour to see if anything had happened in the night. There were very few people about, and although the sun was bright and the air clear and fresh, the big grim-looking waves that seemed dark themselves because the foam that topped them was like snow, forced themselves in through the narrow mouth of the harbour, like a bullying man going through a crowd. Somehow I felt glad that Jonathan was not on the sea last night, but on land. But oh, is he on land or sea? Where is he and how? I'm getting fearfully anxious about him. If I only knew what to do and could do anything. 10th of August. The funeral of the poor sea captain today was most touching. Every boat in the harbour seemed to be there, and the coffin was carried by captains all the way from Tate Hill Pier up to the churchyard. Lucy came with me, and we went early to our old seat, whilst the cortege of boats went up the river to the viaduct and came down again. We had a lovely view and saw the procession nearly all the way. The poor fellow was laid to rest quite near our seat, so that we stood on it when the time came and saw everything. Poor Lucy seemed much upset. She was restless and uneasy all the time, and I cannot but think that her dreaming at night is telling on her. She is quite odd in one thing. She will not admit to me that there is any cause for restlessness. Or if there be, she does not understand it herself. There is an additional cause in that. Poor old Mr. Swales was found dead this morning on our seat. His neck had been broken. He'd evidently, as the doctor said, fallen back in the seat in some sort of fright, for there was a look of fear and horror on his face that men said made them shudder. Poor dear old man. Perhaps he had seen death with his dying eyes. Lucy is so sweet and sensitive that she feels the influences more acutely than other people do. Just now she was quite upset by a little thing which I did not much heed. Though I am, myself, very fond of animals, one of the men who came up here often to look for the boats was followed by his dog. The dog is always with him. They are both quiet persons, and I never saw the man angry nor heard the dog bark. During the service the dog would not come to its master, who was on the seat, but kept a few yards off, barking and howling. His master spoke to it gently, and then harshly, and then angrily, but it would neither come nor cease to make a noise. It was in a sort of fury, with its eyes savage, and all its hair bristling out like a cat's tail, when puss is on the warpath. Finally the man too got angry, and jumped down and kicked the dog, and took it by the scruff of the neck, and half dragged and half threw it on the tombstone on which the seat is fixed. The moment it touched the stone, the poor thing became quiet, and fell into a tremble. It did not try to get away, but crouched down, quivering and cowering. I was in such a pitiable state of terror, although I tried, though without effect, to comfort it. Lucy was full of pity too, but she did not attempt to touch the dog, but looked at it in an agonised sort of way. I greatly fear she is too supersensitive for nature to go through the world without trouble. She will be dreaming of this tonight, I am sure. The whole agglomeration of things. The ship steered into port by a dead man, his attitude tied to the wheel with a crucifix and beads, the touching funeral, the dog, now furious and now in terror, will afford material for her dreams. I think it would be best for her to go to bed tired out physically, so I shall take her for a long walk by the cliffs to Robin Hood's Bay and back. She ought not to have much inclination for sleepwalking then. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8 of Dracula by Bram Stoker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8. Mina Murray's Journal. Same day, 11 o'clock. Oh, but I am tired. If it were not that I had made my diary a duty, I should not open it tonight. We had such a lovely walk with Lucy. After a while I was in gay spirits, owing, I think, to some dear cows who came nosing towards us in a field close to the lighthouse, and frightened the wits out of us. I believe we forgot everything except, of course, personal fear, and it seemed to wipe the slate clean and give us a fresh start. We had a capital severe tea at Robin Hood's Bay in a sweet little old-fashioned inn, with a bow window right over the seaweed-covered rocks of the Strand. I believe we should have shocked the new woman with our appetites. Men are more tolerant, bless them. Then we walked home, with some or rather many stoppages to rest, and with our hearts full of a constant dread of wild bulls. Lucy was really tired, and we intended to creep off to bed as soon as we could. The young curate came in, however, and Mrs. Westerner asked him to stay for supper. Lucy and I had both a fight for it with the dusty miller. I knew it was a hard fight on my part, and I am quite heroic. I think that some day the bishops must get together and see about breeding up a new class of curates who don't take supper, no matter how they may be pressed to, and who will know when girls are tired. Lucy is asleep and breathing softly. She has more colour in her cheeks than usual, and looks oh so sweet. If Mr. Holmwood fell in love with her seeing her only in the drawing room, I wonder what he would say if he saw her now. Some of the new women writers will someday start an idea that men and women should be allowed to see each other asleep before proposing or accepting, but I suppose that the new woman wouldn't condescend in future to accept she will do the proposing herself, and a nice job she will make of it too. There's some consolation in that. I'm so happy tonight because dear Lucy seems better. I really believe she has turned the corner and that we're over her troubles with dreaming. I should be quite happy if I only knew if Jonathan, God bless and keep him. 11th of August, 3 a.m. Diary again. No sleep now, so I may as well write. I'm too agitated to sleep. We had such an adventure, such agonising experiences. I fell asleep as soon as I'd closed my diary. Suddenly I became broad awake and sat up with a horrible sense of fear upon me, with some feeling of emptiness around me. The room was dark, so I could not see Lucy's bed. I stole across and felt for her. The bed was empty. I lit a match and found she was not in the room. The door was shut, but not locked as I had left it. I feared to wake her mother, who has been more than usually ill lately, so threw on some clothes and got ready to look for her. As I was leaving the room, it struck me that the clothes she wore might give me some clue to her dreaming intention. Dressing gown would mean how, dress outside. Dressing gown and dress were both in their places. Thank God, I said to myself. She cannot be far, she's only in her nightdress. I ran downstairs and looked in the sitting room. Not there. Then I looked in all the other open rooms of the house, with an ever-growing fear chilling my heart. I finally came to the hall door and found it open. It was not wide open. The catch of the lock had not caught. The people of the house are careful to lock the door every night, so I feared that Lucy must have gone out as she was. There was no time to think of what might happen. A vague, overmastering fear obscured all details. I took a big heavy shawl and ran out. The clock was striking 1 as I was in the crescent. There was not a soul in sight. I ran along the north terrace but could see no sign of the white figure which I expected. At the edge of the west cliff above the pier, I looked across the harbour to the east cliff, in the hope, or fear, I don't know which, of seeing Lucy in our favourite seat. There was a bright full moon with heavy black driving clouds, which threw the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade as they sailed across. For a moment or two I could see nothing, as the shadow of a cloud obscured St Mary's Church and all around it. Then as the cloud passed I could see the ruins of the abbey coming into view, and as the edge of a narrow band of light, sharp as a sword cut, moved along, the church and the churchyard became gradually visible. Whatever my expectation was, it was not disappointed, for there, on our favourite seat, the silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure, snowy white. The coming of the cloud was just too quick for me to see much, but shadow shut down on light almost immediately. But it seemed to me as though something dark stood behind the seat, where the white figure shone. I bent over it. What it was, whether a man or beast, I could not tell. I did not wait to catch another glance, but flew down the steep steps to the pier, along by the fish market to the bridge, which was the only way to reach the east cliff. The town seemed as dead, for not a soul did I see. I rejoiced that it was so, for I wanted no witness to poor Lucy's condition. Time and distance seemed endless, and my knees trembled, and my breath became laboured as I toiled up the endless steps to the abbey. I must have gone fast, yet it seemed to me as if my feet were weighted with lead, and as though every joint in my body were rusty. When I got almost to the top, I could see the seat and the white figure, for I was now close enough to distinguish it, even through the spells of shadow. There was undoubtedly something long and black bending over the half-reclining white figure. I called in fright, "Lucy, Lucy!" And something raised a head, and from where I was, I could see a white face and red gleaming eyes. Lucy did not answer. I ran into the entrance of the churchyard. As I entered, the church was between me and the seat, and for a minute or so I lost sight of her. When I came in view again, the cloud had passed, and the moonlight struck so brilliantly that I could see Lucy half reclining, with her head lying over the back of the seat. She was quite alone, and there was not a sign of any living thing about. When I bent over her, I could see that she was still asleep. Her lips were parted, and she was breathing, not softly as usual with her, but in long, heavy gasps, as though striving to get her lungs full at every breath. As I came close, she put up her hand in her sleep and pulled the collar of her nightdress close around her throat. While she did so, there came a little shudder through her, as though she felt the cold. I flung the warm shawl over her and drew the edges tight round her neck, for I dreaded lest she should get some deadly chill from the night air, unclad as she was. I feared to wake her all at once, so in order to have my hands free that I might help her, I fastened the shawl at her throat with a big safety pin. But I must have been clumsy in my anxiety and pinched or pricked her with it, for by and by, when her breathing became quieter, she put her hand to her throat again and moaned. When I had her carefully wrapped up, I put my shoes on her feet and then began very gently to wake her. At first she did not respond, but gradually she became more uneasy in her sleep, moaning and sighing occasionally. At last, as time was passing fast, and for many other reasons I wished to get her home at once, I shook her more forcibly, till finally she opened her eyes and awoke. She did not seem surprised to see me, as of course she did not realise all at once where she was. Lucy always wakes prettily, and even at such a time when her body must have been chilled with cold, and her mind somewhat appalled at waking unclad in the churchyard at night, she did not lose her grace. She trembled a little, and clung to me when I told her to come at once with me home. She rose without a word, with the obedience of a child. As we passed along, the gravel hurt my feet, and Lucy noticed me wince. She stopped and wanted to insist upon my taking my shoes, but I could not. However, when we got to the pathway outside the churchyard, there was a puddle of water remaining from the storm. I daubed my feet with mud, using each foot in turn, so that as we went home, no one, in case we should meet anyone, should notice my bare feet. Fortune favoured us, and we got home without meeting a soul. Once we saw a man who seemed not quite sober, passing along the street in front of us, but we hid in a door till he had disappeared, up an opening such as there are here, steep little closes, or wynds as they call them in Scotland. My heart beat so loud all the time that sometimes I thought I should faint. I was filled with anxiety about Lucy, not only for her health, lest she should suffer from the exposure, but for her reputation, in case the story should get wind. When we got in and had washed our feet, and had said a prayer of thankfulness together, I tucked her into bed. Before falling asleep, she asked, even implored me, not to say a word to anyone, even her mother, about her sleepwalking adventure. I hesitated at first to promise, but on thinking of the state of her mother's health, and how the knowledge of such a thing would fret her, and thinking too of how such a story might become distorted, nay, infallibly would, in case it should leak out, I thought it wiser to do so. I hope I did right. I have locked the door and the key is tied to my wrist, so perhaps I shall not be again disturbed. Lucy is sleeping soundly. The reflex of the dawn is high and far over the sea. Same day, noon. All goes well. Lucy slept till I woke her and seemed not to have even changed her sigh. The adventures of the night does not seem to have harmed her. On the contrary, it has benefited her, for she looks better this morning than she has done for weeks. I was sorry to notice that my clumsiness with the safety pin hurt her. Indeed, it might have been serious, for the skin of her throat was pierced. I must have pinched up a piece of loose skin and transfixed it, for there are two little red points like pinpricks, and on the band of her nightdress was a drop of blood. When I apologised and was concerned about it, she laughed and petted me, and said she did not even feel it. Fortunately, it cannot leave a scar, as it is so tiny. Same day, night. We passed a happy day. The air was clear, the sun bright, There was a cool breeze. We took our lunch to Mulgrave Woods. Mrs. Westernard driving by